Okay, so Shavua Tov, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, Bruchim Habayim. We have a weekly class, and this week we have the great pleasure to have Aliza Lipken joining us. She made Aliyah in 2003. She is an avid writer, has a popular blog on the Times of Israel. She's a member of Chokhmat Nashim, which is a platform exclusively for women teaching Torah. She also has a YouTube channel that I checked out really quickly, and it seems like it has like 100 and something, words of wisdom and Torah there. So that's a great platform as well. As you know, in this class, we use the platform of relationships as a place for us to grow in other things and numerous things in our life. Okay, so Aliza's going to be talking about that, and she's going to be following in sync with that idea of the Imahot. So without further ado, Mechavod Aliza, I'm going to mute myself and enjoy from the shiur.
Thank you, Rav Chaim. Tonight, I want to discuss the Imahot, and I'm going to go a little bit within the narrative of the Chumash, the last few parashiyot, and maybe one past, in tend to just go right over and don't notice that there are very important points being made about how the story is told and what is said, what is not said. And all these are meant for us to learn some very, very important lessons. And a lot of things that we'll learn through the Imahot and how that's pertinent to us and our relationships and life in general. So much to learn. So I hope tonight to start by expressing how the Imahot are not merely serving as a counterpart to the Avot in terms of these are Avot, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, so important, and that they needed a good Rebbetzin to be there on the side. But our Imahot, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah, all in their own right, have very important qualities that have gone so deep into our DNA that make us part and parcel of who we are, and that it's important to revisit these stories and to learn them and to keep them in the forefront of our consciousness, because we all have these qualities. Either some of us, they're dormant and we need to manifest them, and other people, it's more obvious and it's more there. But the more we review these stories, the more they're in the front and center of our consciousness, the more likely we'll be able to live out and manifest these qualities that are helpful in living a good life, and living a quality life, and living a godly life, and in getting through life successfully. So in order to do that, I want to start, of course, with the first of our Imahot, and that's Sarah Imenu. So Sarah, we're introduced all the way in the beginning, and we're told that Abraham takes her as a wife, and at that point she goes by the name Sarai, not Sarah. And then we're told, and it was Yiska, and the Meforshim tell us that Yiska is another name for Sarah. And then later on, all the way towards the end of her life, God changes her, I shouldn't say changes, tells Avram to only refer to her as Sarah. So these are three different ways in which she's known. And it's very important to distinguish and to understand names, because names are not just a way in which to reference a person. They are tell you something about the essence of the person. And so at first she's known as Yiska. Now Yiska, Rashi and the Gemara tell us means to see. She was blessed with an ability. She was the first prophetess that we had, that she was able to see things. She was able to understand that what she wanted was aligned with the will of God. She saw and understood what was the will of God. And the reason why she was such a perfect match, why Abraham Avinu was attracted to Sarah, who was known as Yiska at the time, was because Abraham had, as we're told, this machloket, whether he found God when he was 3 or whether he found God when he was older, when he was 40. This is a difference because he both had an intuitive understanding there was a God, which is, intuition is higher at the younger levels when you're a young child, like when you're 3 years old, or when he's 40, out of the intellectual capacity that he had in studying the world and trying to understand the world, that it only made sense to him that there is this one great God. And everything that he believed aligned with everything that Sarah saw, with everything that Sarah understood in her visions of understanding through God. And so they made this perfect couple. They were aligned really, really well. And that's why when she married Abraham, he refers to her as Sarai, because Sarai can mean two things, which are both perfect for her. Sar could either be a princess or Sar can be a minister, an important person. And she was most definitely the nature of a princess. We're told she was very, very beautiful, not just externally in her face and in her form, but she was beautiful in all her deeds, which her physical and spiritual life aligned properly. And that's why it was everlasting. That's why at the end of her life, where the text goes through such great pains to tell us she was 127 years old, going through this years, that all of her years were full because her beauty, her physical beauty matched with her spiritual beauty on that level. And she had this beauty. So she was Abraham's crowning glory in terms of her beauty. As we know, Paro and Abimelech and everybody desired her because she was so beautiful. And the reason why she was so fetching was because it was more than more than just her face. It was skin deep, it was inside, it was internal, it was her ma'asim tovim that shone forth. And when somebody's so good like that, it's a light that just shines forth, that everybody can detect on one level or another, not necessarily knowing why it's so beautiful, but seeing it and sensing it through everything, through her whole mahut, through her whole being. And so she was a crowning glory in the beauty, but she was also Sarah, which is a minister, and God and Abraham saw her as Sarai, my minister. The I, the yud at the end is my. So either my princess or my minister, because as we're told, Abraham used to preach and minister to the men, and Sarah would preach and minister to the women. And that everything that Sarah did was in tandem with everything that Abraham believed, and they worked together all their life. It was a beautiful marriage until it wasn't. And when was that? When we get all the way at the end, when Abraham is 99 years old, and God comes to Abraham and he renews this promise that Abraham is going to have this progeny, and that Abraham is going to get the land. And God tells Abraham Avinu, you should not be called anymore Avram, because until then he was called Avram without the hey. You will now be called Avraham. And he inserts the hey in the middle. And this hey changes the whole meaning of his name, is that now he will be Av Hamon Hagayim, a father of a multitude of nations. That now his whole being is being changed. Now his purpose is he's going to have Yishmael, he's going to have Yitzchak, he's going to have all these nations coming forth from him, and this is his new purpose. And then he goes on to give some promises, and then he says, very interesting, and Sarai, he says, do not call her Sarai anymore, because her name is Sarah. Call her Sarah. But what he's saying is, if you listen closely, is that Abraham's had a growth and he had a change in life, but Sarah was always meant to be Sarah. The change is She is not Sarai, your minister, your princess. Her life is not just merely revolving around your purpose, Abraham. Sarah is actually a minister of Hashem. She's Sar Hashem, and she's aligned with the will of God. And why is it important for God to tell Abraham this at this point? Because at this point, Yishmael is going to be born. And when Yishmael is going to be born, this is going to be the first point of contention between Sarah and Abraham. Because later on, Sarah is going to see that Yishmael is acting in a way that is not in consonance with the will of God. It is not matim, it is not fitting for a holy being, and she is going to have her son Yitzchak. She says her son Yitzchak, who's meant to be a holy child, a child of God, can't grow up with such bad influence. And this is something that's very problematic for Abraham. Everything that Abraham stood for, first of all, he loved his son. It would be very painful for him to part with his son. And he's chesed. He is the emblem of chesed. How can somebody who's the emblem of chesed throw out his own son from his own home? That should be unheard of to somebody like Abraham, who has chesed for people that aren't even related for him. He's going to throw it at his own son. And so this is something that goes against everything that is Abraham. So Hashem has to say to him, you have to, and he says, to shma bekol Sarah. And kol, to listen to the voice of Sarah is what it means. And kol doesn't just mean voice, doesn't just mean what she's saying. Kol is indicative of the essence. Kol is indicative of the deep God within, and that Sarah was aligned with the will of God, and that what Sarah wants here, although it's painful and it's difficult, and it's not something that any father would want to do, especially Abraham Avinu, you have to listen to her. And if Yishmael is a bad influence and Sarah says he has to leave, he has to leave. And Hashem says that she is Sarah, she is Sarah Hashem, she is representing me. She says to leave, you listen to her. And so Abraham does, because Abraham, we know, has passed these tests beautifully. And as painful as was, he listened to Sarah, and he sent Yishmael out of the home. And as we can see, even proof, if you look later on, that Sarah's decision worked. It worked because Yitzchak was able to grow up to be Yitzchak. And not only that, but it also worked for Hagar and Yishmael, who had to be banned, Hagar, the mother of Yishmael, and Yishmael, who were banned from the home, because Yishmael later on went on to build his life. And later on, we're told by the Mefarshim that he did do tshuva. And we're told that Hagar had so many years of introspection, and she stayed, and she didn't remarried, and she worked herself. Some of the Mefarshim tell us this, that she became Keturah. Even she had a change of name and remarried Abraham, and went on to have 6 more of Abraham's children to build other nations in her own building of her character. And that this decision of Sarah proved to be good for Yitzchak, for the home, for the shalom bayit between Abraham and Sarah, for Hagar, for Yishmael, and for everybody. It was the best situation, even though it was the hard situation at the time, because at the moment, it ends up being the right decision. And she was able to understand this and know this and implement this. And the greatness of she, we're told, was the one who brought the light into the tent. But then when we go into the next Imah that we're going to discuss, Rivka, we have to get to the point where, of course, it gets to the end of Sarah's life, and she passes away in Chaye Sarah. And right after she passes away and Abraham managed to buy the Marat HaMachpelah, the first thing that we're told is that he feels the sense of urgency to find a wife for Yitzchak. Why? Because now Yitzchak's mother, Sarah, this great woman, is gone. She has passed. And we're told that Abraham is Zaken Babayamim. He is old. He's gotten on in age. And he understands that the mantle now has to be passed to Yitzchak. And that Yitzchak on his own cannot take the mantle. He needs an Ezer Kenegdo. As we're told in Parashat sheet that a male figure when he becomes of age, he should find an a woman who's going to be his mother. And this was something that Abraham understood. There was an urgency for it now, and he sends Eliezer on the way to find somebody who's going to be the proper woman for Yitzchak. And he knows that it has to be somebody of stellar midot. He knows that somebody has to be really fine character traits. And he understands, after dealing with the Bnei Chet that live in Eretz Canaan, that these people are not good people. These people are not straight and honest people. And that's the worst kind of people you can get into. And he tells his servant to go back to where he came, to where Abraham came from, and to go find a woman with proper midot who will be the proper counterpart for Yitzchak. Because without that, he cannot go and move on and take the mantle from Abraham to be the next in the generation to be the proper to be her step in order to Am Yisrael. So, and when he's on his way, as now before he gets to the well, kindness with your servant, and if you know you can find the woman who will only offer me to my, that she will be the one. She will be the one that I will know, that it will be a sign that she is the proper one for Yitzchak. And this was really not, it was a request that was difficult, because to give, I don't think he was really counting it, because told right after he finishes speaking, Rivka comes to the well and he asks Rivka to drink, and Rivka gives him to drink, and she offers to give drink to all 10 camels. Now, to fill up that bucket and to running back and forth and to bring drink for 10 camels, even we're told, if you read the narrative, you'll see that Eliezer was even flabbergasted. He was like, what? Could it be? Could it be that God actually sent this woman? She's doing this? He couldn't believe it. And everything that we're told about Rivka, and the Mefarshim tell us, is that she was like Avraham Avinu. When you hear the words that are used to describe her, when it says Vayaratz, she ran back and forth to the well. She ran for the stranger the same way that Abraham, when the strangers came to his tent, he was running back and forth to give them food. And she was the one who went, when she finally, we're told she goes back with Eliezer and she marries Yitzchak, and when she has finally does get pregnant and has twins in her womb, and they're agitating and there's great discomfort, she knows something's wrong, she goes herself lidrosh at Hashem. She goes to inquire of God. This is not something that is simple, that any woman just goes and does. This is somebody who has a true faith in God, who believes in herself enough. She comes from a home with people like Lavan and Bethuel, which were not of the greatest stock. You have to realize, I mean, I know people today, good people, who don't feel they can themselves go and ask God for things. They themselves feel they have to go to the grave of, or to this chacham or that chacham or this rabbi. They don't feel they can ask God themselves. Now you take somebody like Rivka. We know Rivka's great in hindsight. She didn't think she was so great. She didn't think as a matter of fact, we're told when she sees Yitzchak, she covers up. She felt insecure with who she was. She felt she had to hide who she was. But she had enough understanding of God that you can go, and she made it happen. She asked God, and we're told that God answered her. God answered her because God's waiting. And if you go from the bottom of your heart and you seek out God, God answers your prayers. God's waiting for whoever. God has a relationship with us. We believe that God is there for everybody. That's why we all daven every day, because we understand that God wants a personal relationship with each and every individual. And she was able to understand that on her own without having been taught that. This is a huge, huge thing that she come to this on her own, and that she had this physical strength, she had this spiritual strength. She was so much like Abraham Avinu, and this was perfect for Yitzchak. This was perfect because Yitzchak, we're told that he was the forefather who we're told when we explain him, Gevura, that he has the attribute of Gevura, which is, it's more of a strength, and it's not soft. He needed the chesed to complement his Gevura. That's why Yitzchak with his Gvura and Rivka with the Chesed were able to have Yaakov, which was Tiferet. He needed that counterpart because he needed to be pulled towards the middle, and Rivka was the perfect one. Rivka was the woman equivalent of Abraham Avinu, and that she was put in his life to help him to go till the next generation to pass the mantle on then to Yaakov. And as we're told, I want to get to Rachel and Leah, that Yitzchak and Rivka, we know, had twins. They had Yaakov and Esav. And Yaakov and Esav, now, again, when we're told the story, we all think about it with hindsight, with what we know. And we think of Esav as the bad guy, and Yaakov, of course, is Yaakov. But when people are born, God gives everybody bichirat chashit. Everybody has the ability to choose what is right, what is good, and to go in the way of God. And the bottom line is that when Yitzchak and Rivka had the two of them, they could have worked together. There was potential there. Yaakov was an ish tam yoshev ba'ohalim. He was the introspective one. He was the learner. He was the one who sat in the tents and he didn't want to go out. And Esav was an Ishadah. He was a man of the field and he liked to go out. Now, being an extrovert and being someone who likes to go out in the right way to serve God, but Esav veered off the derech. Now, Esav, we're told in the story when he comes back from the field into the house, and we're told that this is after the death of Abraham, and that's why Yaakov is preparing lentil soup. This is a food of mourning. Lentil is round, and in times of mourning, people eat round things, either chickpeas or lentils. And Yaakov's preparing this soup after Abraham passed, and Esav was apparently traumatized from the death. Abraham had a very big impact on his grandchildren. They both loved him very, very much. And it was difficult for them in different ways. And Yaakov was home making the soup, preparing for mourning in the way that people mourned. But Esav went wild. He went out, and the Mefarshim tell us that he did the 3 big sins, and he came home, and he was ayef. We're told he was ayef. We translate it, and if you look at the language in which he speaks, he says, when he asks Yaakov, give me some of that red stuff, pour some of that red stuff down my throat. And Yaakov says, well, I will if you sell me the birthright. And Esav says, well, what good is it to me because I'm going to die? You see, he's having an existential crisis now. He realized everybody's going to die. Even Abraham Avinu dies, and he went out and he did a whole bunch of terrible things, and he knows that he's going to one day die, and he knows that his fate's not good after he's done all these sins. And I think that he was crying out, and what we're told is that Yaakov saw that this is a person who's not capable of taking the blessing, and he wanted this blessing, and he took the situation and he sold him the birthright, which Esav, we know, scorned the birthright. It says right out in the narrative that he said okay, he ate, and he got up, and he made scorn of the birthright. And this was where everything started to take a turn for the worse. And at that point, they started down a trail, and once one bad thing happens, as we know, it's so easy for it to just go out of control. And this is what happened. So Yaakov bought the birthright from Esav, and Rivka understood that she did not want to upset Yitzchak, and she wanted to make it happen in a way that was least going to be the least drama and the least traumatic for everybody. And so she devised this plan when Yitzchak said to Esav, I don't know when I'm going to die, and he was blind, and he said, go out and get me some game. And Rivka quickly tells Yaakov when he's out, quickly go get the meat and I'll prepare it. And as we know, the story goes, she covers his arms with the fur and the whole trick, right? So he gets the birthright. Now, all this story is important, and I'll tell you why we're getting there, is because once he tricks Yitzchak and he takes the blessing that Esav thinks is rightfully his, even though he sold the birthright to Yaakov. So really, I don't think it was rightfully his. And Esav comes back and finds out. We're told that he cries this loud, bitter cry. And he devises in his heart, he says, when my father dies, I'm going to kill Yaakov. I mean, this is really something that was very traumatic for him. And we're told that Rivka gets wind of this, and she is told this is probably also divine, because Esav said this in his heart. And the only way for Rivka to know what's in his heart is by divine interference. So she is informed that Esav plans on killing Yaakov, and she's worried. And she tells Yaakov, listen, your brother wants to kill you. You have to get out of here until he cools down. And again, she, in her wisdom, she doesn't want to upset Yitzchak anymore and tell him one of your sons wants to kill the other sons because he stole the bride. All this is too much. He's old, he's blind, and she's taking care of him. She loves him. So she decides she's going to kill two birds with one stone. She's going to tell Yitzchak, you know what? Look, Yaakov's already 40, and Esav already took two wives, b'nei chet, which we're told before that they were causing this great angst and agony to both Yitzchak and Rivka, because they would do avodah zarah in the tent, and they were just causing them such a hard, difficult life because they were doing these things that were not good. And so Rivka says, it's time for Yaakov to get married. If he marries a wife from here, it's going to cut my life short. I can't take it anymore. We got to send him out. We got to send him back to my family, to where Avram's family came from. And this was very acceptable, of course, to Yitzchak. Yitzchak got Rivka from where Avram's family came from, and they're good people. They were fine midah. It was a good excuse. And so he blesses Yaakov. He tells him to go out. So all this story is very important in understanding why Yaakov had to marry two sisters, why he had to marry Rachel and Leah. Because originally it was customary for people to marry cousins. Abraham married Sarah, who was in the family, and people were very tribal then. They married into the family who they knew were good people, who they knew were trustworthy people. And they were informed that Lavan, who's the brother of Rivka, had two daughters, and Rachel and Leah, and that they would be perfect for Yaakov and Esav, that the older should go to the older and the younger should go to the younger. So it was known that Esav would marry Leah and Yaakov would marry Rachel. But what happens is, when he gets there, we're told in the narrative that Leah's eyes were rakot, her eyes were tender, they were swollen, they were puffy, and Rachel was beautiful. And the Chachamim tell us that the reason why Leah's eyes were tender, Esav managed to gain the reputation. Everybody knew what Esav was about. Everybody knew that Esav was not a good guy who engaged in activity that was not proper. And she didn't want a life like that. She wanted a good, holy life. And all these years in crying and prayer actually merited her to marry Yaakov. And we're told when Yaakov got there, he loved Rachel. He worked for Lavan. He said for 7 years, he said, I'll work for you for 7 years for Rachel. And Lavan tricked him. But Lavan's trick was also, no trick can happen in its own. There was reasons why everything happened. So from Leah's point, her prayers to God worked. And from the side of Yaakov, why did Yaakov deserve that, right? But Yaakov, when he did not make the alliance properly, if him and Esav worked together, if Esav had his act together, and they worked together to be a force in bringing God into the universe, then Esav could marry Leah because he would have been good, and Leah was appropriate for him. And Yaakov could marry Rachel, and they can work as forces together to bring about God in the world. But once Esav took the other path, and Yaakov was not working with Esav on this mission, he needed somebody in his life that was like Esav, who was more extroverted, who can be this force and teach him how to be this way for the good, not to be this way in terms of trickery, but how to understand. Because a lot of times in life is unfortunately a lot like a chess game. And it's not necessarily that he has to learn how to be in the house of Laban, to be in trickery and in manipulation, but he has to be crafty in life, because in life, unfortunately, there's going to be times where you have to deal with people. Life is like a chess game, and he has to learn how to be crafty in maneuvering, in trying to do the will of God, how to maneuver best, but to do it in a right way, in a good way. And Leah was a tzaddiket who knew how to go out, who was brought up in the house of Lavan, who understood these things and could teach Yaakov. And Yaakov had to go out now and work for Lavan. He had to go out in the field. He spent days in the field. No more ish tam yoshev ba'olim. No more was he allowed to sit in the tents and do the study. He was forced. He was forced to do the things in the field that Esav was doing naturally, because now he had to be a vessel for this bracha. He took the bracha of Esav, but he wasn't the proper vessel to accept it. So all this, the working in the field and having Leah as a wife, was for him now to be able to be the Esav part. He had to be both parts in serving God. And Rachel was a proper wife for him in terms of they were the same. But so we understand that Leah has this great quality. And Rachel, what is it about Rachel? So everybody knows the story about Rachel, but it's not in the narrative. It's in the Mefarshim. We learn this out. It's not written in the pasuk itself, but we're told that when Yaakov had worked the 7 years for Rachel, and Lavan tricked Yaakov and gave Leah, covered her, and she didn't know till the next morning that he actually married Leah. We were told that Rachel gave the signs to Leah because they suspected that Lavan was going to trick Yaakov. They didn't trust, nobody trusted Lavan because he was always a man of schemes, and they knew that something might go wrong. So we're told that Rachel gave all the signs over to Leah because why? She loved her sister. And you know what happened? We're told Lavan invited the whole entire town to this wedding. And it was a big deal. And even though Rachel and Yaakov made signs together to say, okay, we're going to know, for sure that this is you. Yes, I'll know this is you. But then when Rachel saw that Lavan's inviting the whole town, and that her sister, who she saw for years, she saw her sister crying and in pain and in agony. She didn't want to see her have to suffer that embarrassment, in front of all the people. Not only would she would not be able to marry Yaakov, but her reputation would be ruined. She'd be forced to marry Esav, or no one would want to marry her after that disgrace. And she really cared about her sister. And even though it was costing her so much, it was costing her her own possible future, she couldn't see her sister suffer anymore. And this is one of the highest levels of a mitzvah, to care about somebody else like that. But if you look in the Pesukim, and this is fascinating, if you look in the Pesukim, you don't see any of that. It doesn't tell us that straight out. The things that it tells us about Rachel makes you think, because what do we hear? We hear then that Leah marries, and of course we know when he finds out, he says to Laban, what do you do? And he says, okay, work for me another week, and then you can have Rachel, and then you'll work for me another 7 years. So he gets to marry Rachel, but then Rachel is barren, and Leah gives birth to not 1, 2, 3, 4. By the time he's on the fourth wife and on the fourth child, and she's given birth and she's starting to feel Leah better about the marriage and everything, and Rachel sees she's not giving birth, it becomes very difficult, and Leah's son, Reuven, firstborn, loves his mother very much, goes out to the field in the time of the wheat harvest, and he finds these dudaim. We're told they're mandrakes, which was seen in the olden days as some sort of a love potion that could help fertility. It was seen as a fertility drug. And Rachel saw that Reuven brought these mandrakes to Leah, and she was so desperate. And she said to Leah, give me please some of your son's mandrakes. And Leah says, it's not enough that you stole my husband, you want to steal my son's dudaim, my son's mandrakes too? Now, she responds and she says, it's very interesting, there's so much to learn from this pasuk. She says, okay, so you know what? You get tonight to stay with Yaakov, to sleep with Yaakov tonight, and I will take some of the dudaim. And they make this trade. Now, 2 things that are very important to note in this. First of all, maybe more than 2 things. First of all, when Leah says, it's not enough that you take my husband, Rachel could say, what? What are you talking about? He was supposed to be my husband. How can you say, I'm taking your husband? You took my husband. She doesn't say that. She doesn't say that at all. Because why? She still cares about her sister. She still loves her sister. She still doesn't want her sister to feel hated. All she wants is to have children. And she's not going to get into that. She's not going to hurt her sister for a moment. It's just, okay, I understand you need the love. I understand you need the companionship. You can go with Yaakov tonight. I just want to have a child, so just please give me some of these dudaim. But this is problematic again, because why? First of all, why is she relying on dudaim? Why is she relying on this potion to give birth? When she went to Yaakov and she complained, and she said to Yaakov, it says, give me children or I'm dead. Nochi meta, says, I'm dead. And we're told that Yaakov got very upset. Yaakov got livid when he heard this. It says, Vayichar af, he was very, very angry. And he says, Hatachat Elokim Anochi, am I in place of God? Am I in place of God who closed your womb? Why are you coming to me? Now, first of all, you think there's 2 things. Why is Yaakov responding this way? Why isn't he more sensitive to her? Why is he getting so angry? But if you look at the words that he uses, he says, Hatachat Elokim, am I instead of God? And that you look at Rachel's word that she said, Meta Anochi. The last time we hear this kind of words of Meta Anochi is from Esav. When Esav came in from the field, he sold the birthright. He says, what good is it to me anyways, because I am dead? He uses the same language. And this is bringing to memory Yaakov what Esav said. And this is why he gets so angry, because it brings into his recollection everything about Esav. And here you see that the need was really from Rachel was just that he should be compassionate and giving. And in the same place, perhaps we don't know, perhaps if he understood where Esav was coming from and dealt with this angst that he was having from the death of his grandfather, and sat down and spoke to him and dealt with it, maybe he wouldn't be in this situation. And maybe all that came into his consciousness now, and it all made him very, very upset. And then when he says Hatachat Elokim, the next time we see this word Hatachat is when she says that, okay, I'll give you the dudaim. I'll give you, when she's talking to when Leah says, she'll give him the mandrakes for a night with your husband. It's the same language, and she doesn't go to God, she goes to the Dudaim. So this is very problematic. Why is she going to depend on these mandrakes? And another problematic thing we see from Rachel, and we're going to bring this all together, is the next thing we see from Rachel is that she when they finally leave the house of Lavan later on, she steals the trafim, she steals the idols from her father. Now, stealing is a big problem also. And all this is problematic, and yet, the reason why I bring all this up is because despite all these things that we would see as problematic, Rachel is called Rachel Imenu. Rachel, every single Jewish person davens. We all go to Kever Rachel. Rachel, we all consider our mother. There are 12 tribes, most of which do not come from Rachel Imenu. They come from Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah. Only 2 tribes come from Rachel, but we all call Rachel Imenu. And why? Why? Because for the very reason that she cared about her sister, and she cared about her sister, and she gave her sister, because of her, Leah was able to marry Yaakov, and because of her, when she couldn't give birth, she gave Bilhah to Yaakov. And the only reason Zilpah went to Yaakov was because Leah gave to Zilpah to Yaakov, and Leah can only give Zilpah to Yaakov because Rachel let Leah marry Yaakov, and all of the children that come from Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah are all to Rachel's merit because she cared about the dignity of her sister. And all these other things that she did, they might have been wrong, they might have mistakes. If she took the Dudaim, we all do this sometimes. We all believe in God, but we all turn to things that we think will help us anyway. And she just wanted to have children. She wanted to have children, tribes in the land of Israel. And when she stole the avodah zarah from her father, she stole the avodah zarah because either she didn't want him doing it, or she didn't want him to be able to find out where they were, because we know that he used these things to find out. We know he says, I know I was successful because I did these through the trafim. He found out that God was with Yaakov. And everything came from the goodness of her heart. So she did make some mistakes, but the most important things that she did was to take care of the dignity of her sister, to take care of somebody's own self-worth, to build somebody up. And that therefore she gets the credit of every single life that came from all of these people. And that we all go to her, and we all go and ask in her merit, that we should merit to get out of all sorts of sticky situations that we sometimes get ourselves into, or things that we need to change, because she has achieved a great merit out of this. Is the most important quality. But anyway, what I want to say is that Yaakov needed both Rachel and both Leah in his life in order to give birth to the 12 tribes, to have all the different personality traits that are necessary to go into our nation. And it was only through that, at that point, that would be able to achieve that, because it's very, very important that in life that we understand that despite whatever our strengths or talents are, that we cannot go it alone. We need a strong support. We need to make either a strong marriage or a strong familiar relationship that we see the sisters had, and Rachel and Leah, very importantly, even though they had some strife in the house of Lavan, when they finally, 20 years later, were going to leave, Yaakov consulted both of them, and he took them out of the house, and he told them, come to the field, and he spoke to them, and he asked their advice, and they all agreed together on a mission that made sense in order to ensure the security of the future of the whole entire family. And they all came together at the end and worked together. And that's the most important thing. So either you need to have a very, very strong, tight relationship with sometimes an Ezer Kenegdo could be somebody who's different from you, like Yitzchak and Rivka were very different, but worked together to have that fullness. or sometimes it could be somebody who's the same, like Abraham and Sarah were, but Abraham had many alliances with many people that we're told that helped build his character. We're told that he went with these alliances to ask Amram what to do. Or Yaakov and Esav could have been those brothers who could have worked together to be a force, but they didn't. So either a strong bond with a family, with a sister, with a brother, a strong, very, very important to have a wife either who complements you in something that you desperately need, that other part, or if you marry somebody that's like you, to make sure to have alliances with people that can fill those blanks where you lack, to make sure not to just go with people who are only like you, but people that can fulfill that other part, to do the will of God, because we all need each other. We all need to work with each other. We all need to fill in the spots that we're missing to have all these qualities of chesed, of grura, of tiferet, of everything that goes into making the nation of God. And unfortunately, there is some lacking still. There is lacking of compassion and understanding of what we need from our brother, of what we need in our family relationships, of what we need of how to work together. And until we can fully understand and restore the dignity and accept the dignity and see the other person's worth, the God-given worth that God creates us all with, that talent, and how to bring out that talent and how to work with the talent, because sometimes people themselves don't know. Like Esav, maybe we could have cultivated out of him how to be the extrovert and working in the way of God, but didn't work. It just didn't work. And that's why we're still in Galut to this day. But if we can help each other, if we can each help each other to bring out the best in somebody else, and even if you see something that they're doing wrong, you understand every quality has a good and a bad. It can be turned around. Everybody can use any quality that they have that's not working, take that strength and use it for the good. But you have to help. People need help. We all need help in our relationships, in a spousal relationship, in a familial relationship, in every relationship, to bring out the best, to see the best, even when you see it as a weakness. A weakness comes with a second half, and we can work together. And if we can do that and bring out the best in one another, we're doing the greatest chesed. And to always, 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 like Rachel Imenu, care about somebody's dignity, even if you see something that they're saying that you know is based on something that you can say back. If you hold that and let the person have their dignity and just give them what they'll need, they'll come out of it. Because all Leah needed was compassion. All she needed was companionship. All she needed was a husband. And Rachel understood that and gave her that. And that's why Leah thrived and became such a great person. And the reason why she's able to be buried in Marat HaMachpelah. And part of that greatness is due. It's due to what Rachel did to help her. And Rachel gets that credit. And we can do that for other people too. So I think that that's the main message that we need to take from all of this. And there's so much more to say, but my time is up. And I just thank you all so much for joining me. And I hope I was clear. And if anybody has any question, if Chaim, if we have time, Reb Chaim, sorry, if we have time for questions. I can't hear you.
Sorry, it's me. I was muted. Absolutely. We definitely have time for questions. You did a masterful job weaving through Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, Leah, and how each one kind of personified something and how it relates to what their tafkid was. I would love to open up the floor to questions, Rabotai. Who has, feel free, feel comfortable. The data is free, so we're good.
Hi, I have a question also.
Did you guys answer my question?
Just a minute. We'll take Charlene and then we'll go over to you, Stephen.
Oh, okay. I want to ask you, what was the what was the character trait that Rachel exhibited? What was she exhibiting when she did all that for Leah? What's that called? That's one question. And the second question is do you think maybe she did too much for Leah? Is it that she did too much and she put herself down in the process? That's my question.
That's an excellent question. And it's a very hard balance to know. I don't know how you term vatranut, it's a willing to, I don't know how to, it doesn't have a specific, like, chesed, grura, tiferet. It doesn't have a specific title, but she definitely had a good sense of humility. And what you're asking is, did she go too far? And that's a very good question. And it's really hard to know that balance. But I think that sometimes it's the best thing to err on the side of caution when you see somebody, like she saw her sister suffer so many years of pain, and you really can feel that the fact that it affected even her facial features from years and years of crying. And you can imagine what it's like to be a sister and to watch your sister in pain for so many years, and I think that the fact that she can feel the pain of the other as herself, I don't know if you can go too far with that. I do think that um, she could have, what she could have done was maybe learn from Leah how to be a little bit more proactive in making her future, because she went to Yaakov, as opposed to, we see Rivka, who established a relationship with God. You don't see specifically, even when, if you look in the Pesukim, you'll see that Leah did a lot of prayer to God and thanking God. And we see Rachel goes to Yaakov and says, do something, give me a son or I'm dead. I'm not saying that she didn't pray, but it's not obvious in the Pesukim, and maybe it doesn't tell us in the Pesukim because maybe it wasn't done in a way that was enough of an action on her part. And maybe it's because sometimes you'll see when people really suffer, it causes great prayer. And Leah, we know, had a lot of suffering before, and it became her way. And I don't know that, I think Rachel knew that she was going to eventually have children, and maybe I don't know, maybe she should have learned from Leah more than she did. And that's the only thing that I can think. And I don't know if you can go too far in considering somebody's feelings. Maybe she could have had more open communications with her husband instead of getting to the point of desperation. I think that's very important, is this open communication. We learned that a lot also from Yitzchak and Rivka, which I didn't get to talk about too much because we're in very limited time. But I always feel like when there is an open communication, and when there's very important to express yourself before you get to the moment of desperation, because once we get to the moment of desperation, it becomes very, very difficult all around for everybody to deal. It became hard for her, became hard for Yaakov. And that's what holding things in is. So she did, I think, hold things in too much. And we need to learn from that you have to trust enough to be able to speak. And it's a fine balance to be able to speak without hurting somebody. But it can be done. And it's important for self-health also. And if we don't take care of ourselves, it will cause big problems in the end. So.
Thank you. And Leah's trait was that she was she knew how to maneuver things. She knew how to work the outside world. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, she would go out. So we're told that for the good. I mean, when they talk about Dinah later and says Dinah went out, Rashi says that she was like her mother who went out, because Leah went out to greet Yaakov in the field, and she was very proactive in making her future. And she was, that's how come they thought she was good for Asa. She's someone who's very active in doing what they want to be done and making it happen. And so that was Leah, she was very active, and she would make things happen, and she did everything she wanted, she got in the end. She made it happen. So that was it's an important midah. It's important because a lot of us, I think, people that have strong emunah, and I'm a victim of this also, is when you have strong faith, sometimes you think, if God wants it to happen, it'll happen. And so we don't work so much, but God does want us to partner, and he wants us to do it all right and ethically and morally and good, but he wants us to be proactive. And it's important that we should partner with God in doing what is his will. So that's,
Thank you so much.
thank you for
Okay.
coming.
Steven?
I got a question
You
before
have a
I
question?
go. I'm so sorry because I have a dentist appointment in like 5 minutes. I'm so sorry.
Oh, that's okay.
I've always believed in the right girl for each person, depending on depending on the person's character traits, depending on who you're dealing with. So my question to you is, regardless of whether or not, I mean, we all know that Rachel Imenu was the right girl for Yaakov, not Leah. But why couldn't why did Rachel Imenu do what she did, regardless, and why couldn't she just have found a different?
A different person? I didn't hear the end.
Oh,
Sorry, Steven, got cut off. We got cut off at different. You said different.
okay. So my question is, why is Rachel Imenu? Why did she, regardless, let Yaakov have Leah, and instead not find her a different holier
For
man?
Rachel? Oh, for Leah or for Rachel?
I think the question is, why did Rachel allow Leah to marry Yaakov?
We all
right?
know that Rachel is the right girl for
Right.
Yaakov. So why didn't she?
Uh-oh. We keep losing at the last part. I think,
The other
Steven,
than Yaakov?
I think your Wi-Fi took a shot from the dentist. But I'm assuming why didn't one of the sisters allow for the other one to, like, if you're going to marry Rachel, if Rachel's the right one, then should have found for Leah, or if Leah's the right one, should have found for Rachel, right?
What did you say?
Well, I'm not sure what the end of your question is, but let me just say this. So we're told that Yaakov fell in love with Rachel, and he wanted to marry Rachel, and then he got tricked. So he had already married Leah, so that was a done deal because he got tricked and married Leah, so he had no choice in that. And already had his heart set on Rachel from the beginning. It was he loved Rachel, he wanted Rachel, he worked for Rachel, and he was already in that. And Rachel apparently, I mean, it doesn't say what her feelings were, but another 7 days and you'll get Rachel, the woman he'd been waiting for many, 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 many years. I think it was already too far deep in that for anyone else to come to the picture.
Okay. With that, we'll move to the next question. Yehuda, if I'm not mistaken, you had a question?
Sorry, Rabbi Levy, I have to go. I have a dentist appointment.
Enjoy.
We'll talk soon. We'll talk about this later.
Don't do
Thank you,
anything.
Aliza. You're so awesome. All right, I
Thanks
gotta
for
run.
coming. Thanks for attending.
Thank you, Rav. Hi, Lisa. I really enjoyed the class. I joined a little bit late. It's actually my first time, but I'm a longtime student of the Rav, and I have a practical question and a philosophical question. And the practical question is, we talk about the forefathers and the mothers. They were following halachot prior to receiving the Torah. But it talks about hunting. Esau was hunting, but then his father would eat the kosher food. But if he was hunting the animal, he was killing the animals. How was he eating? How was he doing the proper kosher slaughter? That's the practical question. The philosophical question, we talk about how it had to be, and it ties into with your story, how it had to be that basically Yaakov could be like Esau in terms of his character, in terms of his spirit. He could become like Esau when it was necessary, even though he was holier than Esau, but he could be like Esau. My question is, could Esau, and this affects all kinds of stuff, Moshiach, modern politics, etc. My question is, can Esau be like Yaakov?
Very good question.
It's a
Okay, so
modern day question.
first questions first. The kashrut question is, if not everybody agrees on
So you got frozen.
was Sayyid Bipiv, which means he would trap with his mouth. He was trick his father into thinking that he did everything. He would ask questions that he knew were not really questions, like how do you take maaser on salt? Because he was trying to show that he was this great tzaddik who would even take maaser on things that didn't need. So he was trying to make his father think that he was this big tzaddik because he thought that's what his father wanted him to be, and so Yitzchak believed the face that he was putting forward, and so whatever Esav would bring him, he would trust that it was okay. So that's first of all, and the second one, even if
you would assume it's kosher, even though it's game, even though it's hunted and not domesticated.
Yeah, but the second thing is, even if that's the case, it's before we actually received the actual Torah with all the 613 mitzvot, and that they knew how to do things in a way that was acceptable before we actually received the commandments as we know them to be today, and things weren't exactly the same. There's many issues to contend with. Also, how Abraham gave the angels. You'll see there's milk and there's meat. There's a lot of issues that, in terms of that have to be addressed. How that went down, and it's very difficult. And there's various people try and deal with it. But in terms of your second half of your question, I don't believe that Esav can be Yaakov. No, I think that he can be positively affected and curbed in the right way, and that they're supposed to. They're supposed to be brothers working with each other. And you'll see that hopefully in your own relationships, that a lot of times you have friends that are very different from you, and that you manage to affect each other for the better. Each of you will take a little bit of the good from each other, and so people can help each other be a little bit more, and they're not meant to be the other. That's part of the difficulty, I think, with Yaakov, and he's called Yaakov because he held on to the heels of Esav, and until today, you'll see he's the only forefather that goes by both names, even though he has a name change to Yisrael, but he still goes back and forth. And why he still goes back and forth is because there's so much to contend with. And you can't fully be somebody else. There has to be an actualization of who you are in your own uniqueness, in your own specialty, in your own you. And you should be positively effective. Like, a stone should be shined and curved and chiseled right, but you should always still be your own stone. And Esav should never be Yaakov. Esav should be the best Esav he could be, with the help of Yaakov, but not Yaakov himself.
How does that reconcile in the parsha? It says that basically when Rivka had the prophecy that they could not coexist, and then a different discussion set in earlier in Bereshit talks about the four empires. So if we're having this conflict between Rome and Jerusalem, how are they even supposed to coexist? Period. Like, how does that reconciliation work? Hello.
That's very good, very, very good prophecy. The prophecy is intentionally vague, and it says there's two nations in your womb. There's two nations, and it says Rav Ya'avor Za'ir, which can be read different ways. But it's that the Ra, and it depends how Hebrew is a very robust language, and you can define things in different ways. And it's how you put where you put the emphasis, and where you put the period, and where you put the comma. All this goes into it, but it's a very vague prophecy. And the only thing that we're told is that there's two nations, and one will serve the other, right? And it could be depending on how you define the Rav and the Tzair, and it can be different ways. And so it could be defined as a lot of prophecies given by God can be defined in different ways depending on our actions is how it will be defined. There are certain parameters that we work in, but that there could be two nations and one can work to serve the other, but that's not necessarily being one will subjugate the other. It could just be different nations working together, and one can be boosting the other when the other one's low. And the other one, because as you see, even in people, sometimes one needs to be boosted by the other. And depending on who's higher, who has more ability, who has more talent, can help and support the other. It could be defined out that way. But we, from what we know already, from how things played out, we put that interpretation into the prophecy because that's the way it happened. So it fits in nicely as it happened. We can put the pieces in, but it didn't have to be that way. But that's the way through our actions that it ended up fitting into the puzzle.
Okay, great. Excellent, Aliza. Thank you so much. First of all, would like to just say I think it was just so wonderfully crafted together how each one of the Imahot represented something and how it fit into the tikkun, the bigger tikkun of whether it's Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, and just how they mirrored that. That was great. And I appreciate you taking questions and the follow-up questions and the follow-up questions to the follow-up questions. Thank you so much. Once again, we recorded the class, so Be'ezrat Hashem, it'll be up. I'm sure Aliza will put it up as well. And we look forward to being able to host you again. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
so much for having me. And thank you everybody who came and listened. I appreciate all your attendance and all your time at this late or whatever hour from wherever you're coming. Much appreciated. I wish you all, I just want to give end off with a bracha because I think that's the best way to end off. I just want to wish you all that we should all be able to have all these great qualities, to be able to access, to have the ability of Sarah to be in tune, to be aligned with the will of God, to have the strength and the ability to go out like Rivka and to do the will of God. And we should be like Rachel, to all care one another and to be able to make that come into actuality by going out like Leah. We should all be blessed like all the Imahot. It's no wonder why we use this as a blessing for us all on Friday night, and even men.
Amen.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again.
These are qualities, these are not bad, and we should all be blessed to be able to access that. Shavua Tov to everybody.
Amen.
Take care, everybody. Take care. Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Thank you once again.
Thank you.